On the morning of September 14th, 1991, 9 workers gathered at the outskirts of Carson City, Nevada. They were rugged men accustomed to labor: Mark, Alan, Victor, Henry, George, Luis, Brian, Samuel, and Thomas. Backpacks strapped tight, tools packed, and boots laced, they stepped into the pre-dawn chill. The town was quiet, a sleepy expanse under a pink-tinged horizon. Local observers waved goodbye, unaware that this routine job would transform into a haunting enigma. The route led to a remote mining site near the Nevada desert's arid heart. The desert was vast and merciless, waves of heat during the day, bitter cold at night, dunes stretching like frozen waves of sand, and jagged rock formations piercing the horizon. The wind carried dust and a faint metallic scent, warning of dangers that seemed invisible. The workers joked, carried tools, and set up their convoy of old pickup trucks. A thin layer of morning fog clung to the dry earth, and the sun rose sluggishly behind pale clouds. Mark, the group's de facto leader, pointed toward the distant ridges. "We'll be there by noon if we keep pace," he said, voice barely audible over the shifting wind. Luis squinted toward a distant shimmer, a faint orange flicker on the horizon, fleeting, almost impossible to see. "Probably mirages," Victor muttered, but unease settled over the group like a second layer of clothing. By midday, the workers had split into pairs, naturally falling into smaller groups as they navigated rocky passes and dry creek beds. Henry noticed footprints that didn't belong to them, leading away from the main trail before fading into the desert floor. "Did anyone else see these?" he asked. The others shook their heads, brushing it off as desert debris. Yet the air seemed charged, heavier than it should be, as if the earth itself was holding its breath. When they stopped for lunch near a narrow canyon, Mark saw the orange glow again, this time hovering above the ridge like a warning beacon. "Strange light," he whispered, a note of tension in his voice. Samuel laughed, nervously. "Just sunlight bouncing off rocks, probably." But the laughter died quickly when a cold gust swept through the canyon, carrying whispers that sounded almost human, syllables that no one recognized, repeating names that made the blood in their veins turn icy. By evening, the first signs of unease became undeniable. The truck's tires sank into sand that seemed deeper than it should have been, and distant shadows twisted unnaturally across the dunes. The workers set up camp on a plateau, surrounding a small fire. The orange glow flickered again beyond the horizon, pulsing gently, rhythmically. Every man felt it watching, a silent predator. Conversations became short, tense, and wary. As the sun set, the desert fell silent, swallowing every sound. It was a silence so absolute that even the crackle of the fire seemed to echo unnaturally. The next morning, a gray light filtered over the desert, revealing the vast emptiness stretching to jagged mountains. The 9 men packed their gear and set off toward the worksite, a day's march through a landscape that seemed alive. Each step brought strange anomalies: sand that shifted against the wind, distant figures vanishing when approached, and occasional rocks moving subtly, as if nudged by invisible hands. Victor, lagging behind, noticed that Thomas was no longer keeping pace. "Thomas?" he called. No response. He quickened his step but found no footprints. Thomas had vanished without a trace. Alarm rippled through the group. Mark, Alan, and Victor scanned the horizon. The orange glow hovered again above the ridgeline, pulsating like a heartbeat, unnatural and commanding. Luis and Brian, ahead of the others, turned to find George missing. They shouted his name, but only the wind replied, carrying it back distorted, almost as if mocking them. A thin haze descended, reducing visibility to a few meters, and the landscape itself seemed to shift, making familiar landmarks disappear. The desert was no longer predictable. Paths that had been clear now twisted, leading into unknown dunes and jagged ravines. By midday, only 7 remained. Anxiety surged through them. The heat pressed down despite the morning chill, and shadows lengthened unnaturally across the sand. Samuel tripped over a buried ridge, landing near a scattering of footprints that led nowhere. A faint, eerie whisper repeated his name. "Stop, don't turn back!" It seemed to hiss. The remaining men paused, hearts hammering, the desert now an entity, alive and aware of their fear. By evening, 2 more were gone. Brian and Luis disappeared while attempting to navigate a narrow canyon. Only their backpacks remained, abandoned atop a ridge. Mark, Victor, and Alan set up camp near a large rock formation, flames of their fire dancing against the wind, sending shadows across the desert floor. The orange glow hovered just above the horizon, more insistent, illuminating distant dunes with unnatural clarity. Each remaining hiker felt it, a presence, unseen yet tangible, feeding on their panic. Conversations ceased. Every movement seemed watched. The desert had shifted from a hostile environment to a predator, methodical and patient. That night, as the wind howled, every man lay awake, trembling under blankets that offered no warmth against the weight of fear. Reminder for viewers: subscribe and like now, or you may never learn what happens next. The remaining 7 hiked cautiously through narrow canyons, the sand crunching unnaturally beneath their boots. Visibility was poor, fog rolled in from nowhere, veiling the sun. Mark led the line, followed closely by Alan, Victor, Samuel, and others. Shadows stretched along the dunes, morphing as if alive. Every gust of wind carried whispers, some speaking in recognizable syllables, others incomprehensible. They discovered footprints leading off the trail. They were human, yet some were too large, too deep, pressed into rock and sand as if by unnatural weight. Mark called the group to halt. "We need to stick together," he said, but the landscape seemed to rearrange itself. Landmarks shifted. Peaks appeared closer than they should, then vanished. Canyons twisted unnaturally. Panic spread like wildfire. At midday, Samuel vanished. One moment he was adjusting his pack, the next, the desert swallowed him. Only a scarf remained, fluttering in a sudden, icy gust. The remaining men froze, calling for him, but the echoes returned distorted. Fear gripped their hearts. They were no longer just lost, they were hunted. Hours passed with no respite. The orange glow flickered again, pulsating atop a ridge, illuminating the desert with unholy light. Shadows danced unnaturally across dunes, following, sometimes leading, as if corralling them deeper into the unknown. By nightfall, the group dwindled to 5: Mark, Alan, Victor, George, and Henry. The fire they set crackled weakly, struggling against an unnatural chill. As darkness deepened, 2 more disappeared, George and Henry, their screams cut short, fading into the wind. Only 3 remained, huddled against a large rock, watching the pulsating glow. The desert itself seemed alive, moving and breathing. They realized that survival depended not on skill, but on something beyond human comprehension. Reminder: don't forget to subscribe and like. The desert is watching, and you won't want to miss the chilling conclusion. Mark, Alan, and Victor pressed onward, moving like shadows themselves. Each step was uncertain. Sand shifted beneath them unnaturally, dunes appearing taller than before. Whispers teased and mocked them. Every gust carried voices repeating their names, distorted alien. They reached a plateau, overlooking a vast expanse of dunes and jagged mountains. The orange glow was stronger now, almost pulsating in synchronization with their racing hearts. In the distance, scattered remnants of the missing appeared: a boot, a backpack, a hat atop a jagged rock. The scene was surreal, frozen in time. Suddenly, Victor froze, eyes wide. He vanished in a flash, leaving only a faint imprint in the sand. Alan tried to follow but stumbled and disappeared as well. Mark was alone. Desperation turned to dread. The desert no longer seemed natural. The dunes moved subtly, guiding him toward the glow. Every instinct screamed to run, but the sand resisted. Hours, maybe days, passed. Mark's energy drained. The glow hovered above him, illuminating impossible terrain. Then, from nowhere, all remnants of the others appeared, spectral figures glimmering briefly, only to vanish. He screamed, but the desert swallowed the sound. The orange light pulsated, indifferent to his terror. The desert had claimed all 9 workers, leaving behind only whispers, shadows, and the faint glow. Weeks later, search teams combed the Nevada desert. Footprints led to impossible locations. Backpacks were discovered, but no bodies. Not a single survivor returned. Locals whispered about a glowing light that pulsed at night, figures moving between dunes and ridges, disappearing before anyone could approach. The story of the 9 workers became legend, a cautionary tale of greed, ambition, and the unknown. Families mourned. Communities feared the desert's heart. Future hikers reported strange lights and shadows moving in impossible patterns, the orange glow pulsating like a heartbeat. The desert seemed to remember, patiently waiting for the next group. Years later, those who dared approach the region reported the same phenomena: whispers calling names, shadows twisting against the moonlight, footprints appearing and vanishing in seconds. The mystery endured, the desert claiming all who wandered too close. Final reminder: subscribe and like. The desert is alive, and its story continues to haunt every traveler who dares enter its domain.